His lawyer leaned in and whispered 5 words. Just 5. Vincent's face, once smug and self-assured after 15 years across the breakfast table, drained of color. His hands began to shake. The documents he was so eager to sign trembled in his grip, and for the first time in 3 years, I smiled. But that moment came later. To understand it, you need the full context. You need to see how a woman everyone believed had lost her mind was actually playing a long, deliberate game. My name is Alexis Dunst. I am 34 years old, and until 3 months ago, I was married to Vincent Mercer. 15 years of marriage, longer than most celebrity relationships, longer than some small nations have existed, and far longer than my patience should have endured. Still, I stayed. I am stubborn by nature, a trait I inherited from my grandmother. I met Vincent when I was 17. I had finished high school early, not because I was exceptional, but because I was practical and determined to leave my parents' house. I took a minimum wage job as a file clerk at Henderson and Price law firm. The pay was low and the paper cuts were constant, but it was mine. By 18, I had advanced to legal assistant. I was detail-oriented, comfortable with numbers, observant, and disciplined enough to stay quiet when needed. Vincent was 24 when we met at a client event. He was charismatic, ambitious, and spoke endlessly about his future real estate empire. He talked as though success was already guaranteed, waiting only for him to claim it. He said he would build something remarkable. I told him I could help with the paperwork. That was the beginning. We married when I was 19. Tyler was born a year later. I continued working part-time at the law firm while raising our son, contributing to my retirement account, and saving consistently. My grandmother always insisted a woman should have her own money, not hidden, just independent, something no one could take from her. By the time I was 23, Vincent's business finally gained momentum. He asked me to leave the law firm and support him full-time. He needed someone reliable to manage finances, oversee clients, coordinate contractors, and handle operations. Someone he trusted completely. I became that person, unpaid. I handled bookkeeping, office management, client relations, marketing coordination, staging model homes, and event planning. I did all of this while raising Tyler and managing our household. Officially, I was his wife. In practice, I was everything else. For 11 years, I invested myself in Vincent's vision. For 11 years, he received the recognition, awards, and public praise. At industry events, I was introduced simply as his wife. In speeches, he thanked mentors, teams, and ideas, but never me. Over time, his behavior changed. He made decisions without consulting me. He stayed late more often. He criticized small things. My clothes, my cooking, my so-called lack of ambition. I was running his entire back office while raising his child, yet somehow I was not driven enough. Then, 3 months ago, he ended it. He came home on a Tuesday evening while I was preparing dinner, his favorite. He sat me down at the kitchen table, calm and detached. He said he wanted a divorce. He wanted the house, the cars, the business, everything. I could keep Tyler. He said it like a transaction. 15 years ended between the salt shaker and the butter dish. What I didn't know then, but learned later, was that Vincent had been planning this for months. He already had a lawyer, Harold Whitfield, expensive and experienced. He had prepared his exit while I managed his schedule and handled daily logistics. The next day, his mother arrived. Lorraine Mercer had treated me like staff for 15 years. She offered practiced sympathy and told me I should have tried harder. Men have needs, she said, as if explaining something complex. Her own marriage suggested otherwise, but blame was easier than honesty. That first week moved quickly. Vincent relocated me to the guest room. Papers appeared. Settlements were proposed. Timelines were set. Everyone saw a woman whose life had collapsed. A wife discarded after years of service. Someone blindsided. What no one knew, what Vincent never suspected, was that 3 years earlier I had discovered something buried deep in his financial records. And since then, I had been quietly preparing. Within a week of announcing the divorce, Vincent took full control. The guest room became my permanent space in what had once been our shared home. My closet was reduced to 2 small sections he allowed me to keep. The message was unmistakable. This was no longer my house. 2 weeks later, he introduced her. Brittany Sawyer, 27, an employee at his company. Predictable. She had the polished, social media-ready look, blonde highlights, immaculate nails, and designer athleisure that cost more than my weekly groceries. She walked into my kitchen as if it belonged to her, wearing my apron, my grandmother's apron, using my blender to make smoothies. She was younger than my marriage and younger than some of my handbags, but apparently excellent at blending fruit. Vincent displayed her openly. They sat on my couch, watched my television, and ate from my plates. He put his arm around her in front of me, as if I were part of the furniture. The humiliation escalated steadily. First, he canceled my personal credit card, explaining that separating finances was only practical. Then he canceled the joint card. Soon after, he suggested I find another place to stay while things were sorted out. I was being pushed out of my own home. Lorraine returned to help me pack. By help, she meant deciding what I was permitted to keep. Old clothes were acceptable, some family photos. My grandmother's recipe box, she hesitated over that one. Jewelry Vincent had purchased over 15 years was off limits. Furniture I had chosen was not mine. Anything valuable was considered a marital asset to which Vincent was entitled. My belongings were packed into garbage bags. Not boxes, garbage bags. Throughout this, I believed I had one ally, Diane Holloway. We had been friends since high school, 20 years of shared history through relationships, children, and life transitions. She was the first person I called after Vincent's announcement. She checked in constantly, brought wine, listened patiently, and told me I deserved better. Yet something felt wrong. Vincent began referencing my plans before I made them. After I told Diane I was considering fighting for the house, Tyler came home saying his father told him it would never work. When I mentioned apartments in a certain neighborhood, Vincent commented that the area was too expensive for me. The pattern became clear. In hindsight, the signs were obvious. Diane's enthusiasm whenever Vincent entered a room, the excessive compliments, the way she always asked about him first, his business, his happiness. She had admired my husband for years. Vincent noticed, encouraged it, and used it. He likely implied a future together after the divorce, offering just enough hope to secure her loyalty. My closest friend had become his source of information, but the hardest part was Tyler. My son witnessed everything. The girlfriend, the packing, the way his father dismissed me. Vincent worked on him steadily, framing the situation to his advantage. He told Tyler that I was being difficult, that he was trying to be fair, that I was prolonging the conflict. Tyler grew distant, not angry, just uncertain. He didn't know who to trust, and Vincent was persuasive. I could lose the house. I could lose money. I could lose everything material. But watching my son question me, that was the real injury. I hired a lawyer, Nina Castellano, 52, recommended by my former firm. Sharp, direct, and intolerant of nonsense. She reviewed the facts and was clear. I was entitled to half of everything. The house, the business, the accounts. We should fight. I asked her what if I didn't want to. She looked at me as if I had spoken another language. She assumed I was defeated, too worn down to resist. She was wrong. Tyler and I moved into a small apartment. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen barely larger than my old pantry. Boxes filled his room because we couldn't unpack everything. It felt like evidence of how far we had fallen. Meanwhile, Vincent posted photos with Brittany. New chapter. New energy. Blessed. Lorraine commented publicly, praising him and his happiness. Everyone had advice. Everyone believed I had surrendered. They underestimated me. And that, as it turns out, was exactly what I needed. Being underestimated is an advantage. People stop watching, stop protecting their secrets. That's when you learn everything you need to know. 3 years. That's how long I had known the truth about Vincent Mercer and his supposedly thriving empire. It started one ordinary Tuesday night, 3 years before the divorce. Vincent was working late, though I didn't yet know what that meant. I was going through company accounts, reconciling books, performing the tedious work that kept his business afloat. That's when I noticed transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. One, then another, then a pattern. Money was vanishing. I stayed up until 3 a.m. tracing it. What I discovered made my blood run cold. Vincent had been taking loans against everything we owned. Our house, the one everyone admired, had 3 mortgages. The original $400,000, a second for $350,000 4 years prior, and a third for $350,000 2 years prior. We owed $1.1 million on a home valued at $850,000. We were $250,000 underwater. The business was in worse shape. Lines of credit maxed at $200,000, back taxes $85,000, vendor debts $120,000, equipment loans $75,000. The company he flaunted at every party was drowning in nearly $500,000 of debt. Even the cars were leased, balloon payments looming. Nothing was actually owned. We had expensive obligations. I calculated the total debt, approximately $1.9 million. Total assets, about $1.6 million. Net deficit, $300,000, maybe more. Then I traced where the money went. Failed cryptocurrency investments, gambling losses, a secret apartment rented for a woman I didn't know, and lavish personal spending. The empire wasn't real. It was a facade, convincing at a distance, hollow up close. Confronting him would have been disastrous. Vincent was manipulative. If I accused him, he would twist it, make me doubt myself, and possibly claim my separate savings. My grandmother's lesson echoed in my mind. A woman must have her own money. I had kept mine separate. My IRA from my law firm had grown to $180,000. My grandmother's inheritance, $340,000, had been untouched for 6 years. Together, $520,000, fully protected and legally mine. I didn't act immediately. I fortified. I created an irrevocable trust for Tyler with my inheritance and IRA. Vincent couldn't touch it. I documented everything. Mortgages, loans, hidden accounts, suspicious transactions. Copies were stored at my sister's house in a safe deposit box and on an encrypted drive. Then I waited. I knew Vincent would leave eventually. Men like him always do. They seek excitement, younger partners, or more recognition. I just needed to be ready when he demanded everything. 3 years of watching, waiting, smiling at parties while knowing the truth. When Vincent finally demanded the divorce and all the assets, I almost laughed. He wasn't claiming wealth. He was claiming debt. Back in the present, I placed 3 binders on Nina Castellano's desk. 3 years of evidence. She read in silence for nearly an hour. "You've known this for 3 years?" she said finally, awe replacing concern. I explained my strategy. Wait until he demanded everything, then let him inherit the liabilities. The numbers were verified. Documentation airtight. My patience had built the trap. For the next 3 months, I became what everyone expected. Broken, defeated, compliant. I attended mediation with red eyes and trembling hands, spoke softly and asked for minimal settlement. $50,000 cash, personal belongings, shared custody of Tyler. Vincent agreed immediately, probably expecting me to demand half of everything. He thought he was winning. The longer he flaunted his victory, the more he relaxed. He wore his new $15,000 watch to mediation, flaunted dinner dates with Brittany, redecorated our house, and painted over the sage green kitchen I had spent weeks perfecting. Every move he made played into my strategy. Meanwhile, Tyler began noticing inconsistencies. Luxury purchases, yet school trip expenses were impossible. Shopping bags piling up, yet claims of financial strain. My son, perceptive and wise beyond his years, saw through it before 2 lawyers and an accountant did. One evening, he asked quietly, "Mom, is Dad really rich?" I smiled and told him to wait a little longer. Behind the scenes, Nina prepared our legal strategy meticulously. The main divorce agreement stated I relinquished claims to marital property, but attached was a detailed liability disclosure. Every mortgage, loan, and debt explicitly assigned to Vincent. Once he signed, all obligations became his. Legally, perfectly, devastatingly. 2 weeks before the hearing, Harold Whitfield, Vincent's lawyer, suggested a full financial audit. Vincent refused. He wanted the process over. He signed a waiver without reading it, dismissing caution. Patience and careful planning had made Brittany Vincent's supposed advantage an unintentional asset in the legal trap. The night before the hearing, Vincent sent a text. "Thank you for not making this ugly." I stared at it. 15 years of marriage, 15 years of building a life, and he was thanking me for not complicating his exit. I replied simply, "I just want what's best for Tyler." And that was exactly what I had prepared for. His future secured, untouched, protected in a trust. Thursday morning arrived. Courtroom 4B. Judge Patricia Holden, a veteran with 30 years on the family bench, entered. Sunlight poured through tall windows, the scent of polished wood and old papers in the air. This was where 15 years of marriage would end, and where 3 years of planning would pay off. Vincent arrived first. Charcoal Armani suit, his new watch gleaming, confidence radiating. Brittany lingered outside, Lorraine in the gallery, smiling as if victory was inevitable. I arrived shortly after in a simple navy dress, hair in a low bun, no jewelry. Tired, defeated, perfectly convincing. The judge called the case. Mercer versus Mercer. Final dissolution hearing. I understand the parties have reached an agreement. Harold Whitfield confirmed Vincent would assume all marital assets, while I accepted a $50,000 cash settlement. Judge Holden looked at me to ensure my consent was voluntary. Calmly, I said yes. I wanted him to have everything he asked for. Signatures went down. Vincent barely glanced at the documents, eager to finalize his new life. I signed slowly, deliberately, every stroke of the pen precise. Across the courtroom, I watched him smile at Lorraine. Then Harold reached the liability disclosure, the addendum. Every debt, mortgage, loan, and obligation was listed, tied to the assets Vincent believed he was claiming. As he read, confusion spread across his face. He flipped pages, hoping to misread. He hadn't. Harold leaned in, whispered urgently, but Vincent waved him off. Only when he finally read it fully did the realization hit. House debt $1.1 million, business obligations $480,000, vehicle leases $115,000, additional liabilities $200,000. Total debt approximately $1.9 million. Net value negative $300,000. He had demanded assets, but inherited crushing debt instead. Vincent's composure shattered. This isn't right. She hid this from me. This is fraud. Judge Holden's response was firm. Mr. Mercer, sit down. You signed this agreement with competent counsel and declined additional review. These are your debts. Harold produced the waiver he had advised Vincent to review, a waiver Vincent had ignored. He turned to me, voice cracking. You knew. I met his gaze calmly. I was your bookkeeper for 11 years. I knew everything. Emotions cycled across his face, confusion, rage, betrayal, fear, and finally realization. He had done this to himself. He demanded to withdraw the agreement. The judge shook her head. The documents were clear. My settlement, $50,000. Vincent, the assets and all associated debts. The gavel fell. I collected my purse and left, never looking back. In the hallway, Vincent raged at Harold. Brittany, witnessing the fallout, realized this was not the life she expected. She left swiftly. I stepped outside into the spring sunlight. My life smaller, simpler, but entirely mine. The collapse was swift. Within 2 weeks, Brittany moved out, leaving my gray kitchen empty. Within a month, Vincent attempted to sell the house. But underwater, there were no buyers, only banks calling. Within 2 months, his business defaulted. Lines of credit frozen. Vendors filed lawsuits. The empire crumbled. Lorraine scrambled, calling relatives, making excuses, attempting to recover. Diane called, apologetic, shocked at the extent of Vincent's deception. I didn't respond. Some bridges, I realized, aren't meant to be rebuilt. Some friendships don't deserve a second chance. Tyler, observant and perceptive, finally understood without explanation. He saw the court documents, witnessed the collapse, and realized the truth himself. One evening, he sat with me at our second-hand kitchen table. You waited 3 years, he said quietly. You knew all along and just waited. I smiled. I had. Our trust fund, $520,000, remained untouched, securing Tyler's future. My $50,000 settlement established a stable life. Rent, security deposit, basic furniture. No luxury, but safety and independence. I enrolled in interior design courses I had postponed at 23. Finally, I was building my own life. I started small, taking on my first client, Sandra, a 52-year-old woman starting over after a 28-year marriage. Standing in her empty apartment, she asked, "How do you start over?" I thought for a moment and said, "One room at a time, one color at a time, one day at a time." We painted her kitchen sage green. She cried when she saw it. Happy tears, she said, the color of new beginnings. About 3 months after the divorce, Vincent appeared at my apartment. I barely recognized him. He had lost weight, not healthy weight, dark circles under his eyes, wrinkled suit, no watch. He looked like a man who had been through war and lost. I didn't know it was this bad, he said. I made mistakes. I know that now. I leaned against the doorframe and looked at him. The man I had loved for almost half my life, who had discarded me like garbage, now faced the consequences of his choices. "Can we talk? Maybe we can figure something out," he murmured, but he couldn't even finish. He was asking for help. I responded calmly. "After everything, you asked for everything except Tyler. You got exactly what you wanted. Alexis, please?" He started. "Goodbye, Vincent," I said and closed the door. He lingered in the hallway for 10 minutes. I watched through the peephole, eating ice cream, marveling at the scene. 5 stars. Would watch again. That evening, after Tyler went to bed, I sat in our small living room, gazing at my grandmother's photo on the shelf. The recipe box beside it, the one thing Lorraine had almost taken, the thing that mattered most. "You were right about everything, Grandma," I whispered. "Keep your own money. Know your worth. Never let anyone make you feel small." The apartment was quiet, modest, nothing like the house I'd lived in for 15 years. But it was mine. Every paint color, every piece of furniture, every decision. Entirely mine. And for the first time in years, I felt free. 15 years of marriage, 11 years building his dream, 3 years of patient preparation. It had all led to this. Tyler's future was secure. I had my independence. Vincent had claimed his empire, only to inherit the debts he ignored. Justice, patience, and careful planning had won the day. And this was only the beginning of my story. Thank you for watching. More gripping stories are on your screen. Click one now to see the next chapter. I promise you'll love it.